welcome to A Time to Thrill. It's me, your host, Aime Austin. It is July, and I'm about to share the best interview with you. So this month, I have a great conversation with romantic comedy author Pippa Grant. So it starts like they all do. We talk about this during the podcast, actually. So I met Pippa in Houston at a conference called the Romance Author Mastermind in 2018. And by 2019, we're at a beach house sharing a room. And actually, she's the only author with whom I've ever shared a room. I think there may have been somebody else in the room with us. I remember her being there, but that's it. So I'm an only child. I'm not so much with the room sharing, but renting a beach house, these beach retreats, look, we're adult women, we like our own space, but the number of houses available where everybody can have their own room and bathroom are not a billion of them. And because we decided to do this after we were at the conference in Houston, our options were limited. So we were in a place called Galveston Island. I know we took a ferry, but I don't think it's an isolated island. I think it's a peninsula. I should look this up before I do all this, because now you're going to email me and tell me where Galveston Island was. So we rented two houses side by side, and I shared a room with Pippa. It was fine. I don't know what the deal was. I know that I just put in my earpods at night and listen to podcasts to fall asleep. So whether or not somebody's there with me was not particularly relevant, as long as she didn't snore or something. And I don't think she did. I just honestly don't remember. I just remember, like, it's the only time I've ever shared a room. And I was like, okay, well, like, I'm old, but I can probably hack it. And actually, Pippa was delightful. I only remember the fact that she was there. I have literally no other memories, so it must have all been delightful and wonderful. So Pippa is, how can I say this? There are so many authors I know, and so many of whom you've heard on this podcast who are very, very, very successful. But only a couple of them changed what they did to ramp up their success. The first is someone I interviewed probably a couple of years ago, an author named Theodora Taylor. And she too was writing and decided, her books were hit or miss success-wise, and she decided that she was going to think about how to be more successful, and she was able to do it. She writes in the interracial romance space. It seems very niche to me, but it's very, very popular. And once she hit on the way to do that, she became very successful. She actually wrote 2 books about that specifically, and I'll link to that particular episode in the show notes. So she's one. The other one is Pippa Grant, who writes in the romantic comedy space. These are 2 spaces I do not write in. I will never write in. It's beyond me. I'm in my own world over here. When I wrote romance, it was just, we always say straight on this show because that's how we refer to it, but we actually don't mean straight heterosexual, although it's just basically heterosexual cis romance with people who are usually in their 30s or under, because that's what used to sell in traditional publishing very well. And that's where I started, and I never really got past it. I believe I wrote 1 interracial romance. No, 3? 4. Okay, maybe 5. I don't know. I have to really think about it. But it was not the traditional interracial romance, which is usually Black women and white men. I wrote 1 of those, and the rest, I believe, one heroine was Asian, and the other 3, the hero is Asian. No, 4. But 1 was a trilogy, whatever. I'm really digressing. Those books were not greatly successful, so that's why I don't write romance anymore. So what I thought was fascinating is these are 2 women, and today's Pippa, who sat down and were like, I need to do this better or differently or in a different way to achieve the kind of success I want. And they did it. And knowing them both before and after that is absolutely fascinating, because most of the people I encountered, and you've heard some of them on the show, they published early in the indie space, 2010, 2011, 2012. They did it because other people were doing it, but they didn't have any real like hope or prayer on it. And they woke up one day. I'm sure you've heard 2 or 3 of these interviews because I know these people personally because I talk to them often. They woke up one day and they had $1 million. So that's a different trajectory. That's more of a, I guess, the right book at the right time trajectory, where Pippa will talk in this interview about writing the books that we're not doing as well and then plotting a course to change that. And I love to watch people say they're going to do something and then do it brilliantly. It is like the most fascinating thing. And that's something I wanted to share with listeners. She's also an absolutely lovely and delightful person. She's really funny. She's really personable. I mean, we're all like in our house hermits, but when we're out and about, she's delightful, personable. I think you'll love this interview. Let's see, about me, and then I'll get right back to it. So right now, I have finished up the book, His Last Mistress. It's still on pre-order for January. It needs, stuff has to happen between the writing and the publishing, and that's what's going to happen over the next 6 months. All the other 14 books in the Casey Court and Nicole Long series are out there. You can download them at any time. Library, bookstore, ebook, whatever your pleasure, you can get them in various formats. And I would appreciate pre-ordering His Last Mistress. I have been working on, so let me say this. The thriller genre has changed and matured over the years. And I'd like to think that I have kept up with that change and that maturity. So this book, His Last Mistress, sort of reflects that the way that thrillers have changed in the next few years. So where I used to write no dead bodies, now we have dead bodies. Not plural, we have one dead body. There was another book I think that had more. We have a dead body, we have everybody's walking around looking as guilty as sin, and a couple of plot twists. It's been sort of fun to dip my toe into that water. After that, I honestly don't know what's next. I will keep you posted, but I'm like a few irons in the fire, thinking about a few things, and we'll see what comes next. In the meantime, please enjoy this amazing conversation with Pippa Grant. Hi, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. This is me, your host, Aime Austin. This month, I have the utter delight of interviewing romance author Pippa Grant. Hi, Pippa.
Hi, Aime.
It's so good to talk to you. Okay, so usually I start the podcast thanking people for what they've done in my career. I haven't known you that long because I started my career like 1,000 years ago, and I'm starting to feel like a dinosaur. But I will say this because
I relate to this.
I think of you like basically once a week. It's because some years ago you suggested the podcast Normal Gossip.
Oh, I love that podcast.
Yeah, so I was listening to it. So they have like a hiatus. I feel like they've been back 2 or 3 weeks. And I was listening to it this week. They were talking about, I can't even remember. It's in my head, like vague. But I was
my assistant pinged me and she was like, you need to listen to this week's Normal Gossip. And I haven't yet. And I can't remember either.
Last week was the mushrooming, but this week is not mushrooming. It's something different. But so every time it comes on, I think Pippa for Normal Gossip. Because now she has entertained me to and from. I usually listen Saturday morning driving to and from the biking at the beach. But you don't need all that information.
Fun.
But I'm like on my way to the beach, I'm listening to Normal Gossip. Then on my way, I listen to the other half on the way back. But while I'm on Pico getting to Ocean Avenue, I think of you.
I am honored. Like that. Yeah. Normal Gossip is one of the greatest joys in my life. Maybe not one of the greatest, but I enjoy it. Forget chocolate. Give me Normal Gossip. No, it's so fun. It's so fun. I love to share it with people because it cracks me up.
It cracks me up. It's so fun because as a rule, I generally don't gossip because I have a lot of feelings about that as a person. Yeah. I saw something 20 years ago about like how gossip can like tell you a lot of like things about people. And I was like, I think I'm not going to gossip. So consequently, I don't gossip. And so I don't get much gossip because people don't share it with me.
Yeah.
And then, but this is like, gives me like a glimpse into people's like real
Yeah.
lives without
Yeah.
me having to be gossiping.
Hmm.
So it really
Well,
provides that for me.
yeah. The podcast has changed my entire philosophy on good and bad gossip because when you
Wait,
start to
how
consider
so?
when you start to consider things like it's a whisper network thing, right? Like,
Yes.
especially in the writing world, there are
Hmm.
like when you're looking for an agent, right?
Right.
There are things that you're not going to find online. You have to be
Right.
like, I am searching for an agent, and have you ever worked with this person before? And like, if somebody's had a bad experience, they're not going to put that online, but they're going to
Right.
talk with you privately. And I don't know if that's gossip or if that's just
Okay.
information, but it's one of those
Well,
things where it's like, who's safe, who's not. And I always like, anytime I hear a story now, if it's a little incredible, I'm like, but is this real? You know what I mean?
okay, so I will say this. As far as the Whisper Network goes, I think that's really important. But I think of it
Hmm.
mainly, I do think of it in writing. When you said writing, I realize I do. So, like, recently I talked to an editor. Well, now I can't say who. And I talked to an editor,
Hmm.
and the first thing I was like, well, before I do the Zoom call, let me text a few people and ask
Yeah.
them what they think about this editor. So I
Hmm.
do that because it's about
Yeah.
money. But to me, that's really like important. But the
Yeah.
Whisper Network, like in LA and New York, was mostly about like the Harvey Weinstein type guys.
Yeah.
And that I've always thought was really important because there's no, like
Yes.
everybody who is subject to an NDA. So that's
It's
the
about
only way you
safety.
can, it's about safety. So safety and money, I
Hmm.
will engage in gossip about because to me,
Hmm.
that's really important. But whether or not so and so was like at the bar with so
Right.
and so, I got to
Right.
let that go.
Yeah.
I got to let
Yep.
that go.
No, sometimes if I hear a really funny story about someone, I will share it with particular
Hmm.
people that I know are safe to share it with. And I will always
Right.
preface it with, someone told me this, and I have no idea if it is true or not. So I am telling you
Right.
this purely for entertainment value and not because I'm actually putting any stock in it. But it made me
Hmm.
laugh. It made me gasp. And I thought you would enjoy the same experience. So it's less about actually like what happened and more about
Hmm.
the joy of sharing a story that cracks people up. And
Yes.
that's one of the things I love most about normal gossip. It's like all of these stories with the twists and the turns, and I didn't see that coming. And
Mhm.
I listened to one about an HOA, a homeowners association,
Right.
and it not only took me down a rabbit hole, it then inspired an entire half of a backstory for a character one time. And
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
it's so fun, and it's outside the normal world that I live in because I'm such a homebody. Like,
Right.
given a choice,
Yeah.
I will sit at home in my pajamas and sip tea all morning and just watch the world go by, and then eventually switch to like water and occasionally
Mhm.
wine and watch the world go by. And that would be
Oh my
like
God. I
my
think you've
perfect
described
day.
my entire day. I just finished the tea.
Yeah. Yeah. I finished my tea a few hours ago, but yeah. Yeah. No, that would be like, left to my own devices, I would do that. So just having something that brings in story from other places is amazing. I am working on getting out more and exploring the world more and enjoying it more because I think that helps with refilling the well with the creativity.
Yes, very
But
much so. Yeah. So, well, let me ask you this because the reason, and okay, most authors I've interviewed read a lot as a kid.
yes.
And I read for two reasons. One was entertainment because I needed to pass.
Hmm.
I'm an only child. Like, I had like a
Yeah.
lot of time alone. So I needed to
Uh-huh.
pass a lot of time. But the other was that I really wanted a glimpse into people's lives. So when I was a kid, like at
Hmm.
night, I lived in New York City. So there was like sometimes you'd walk when it was dark outside or something. I had a dog, so I'd
Hmm.
walk the dog. And, you could see like the lights are on in people's houses. And I would always like look in people's houses, see what they're doing. And like 95% of people are watching
Yeah.
television, to be honest. So I'm
Yeah.
just like, that's not that interesting. But the blue, well, it used to be blue. I don't know what color it is now, but the blue glow you would see.
Hmm.
But I always wanted to know like what's really going on. Like
Hmm.
and so books for me were that, like they were that
Yeah.
gateway into like, oh, well, this is what happens if X happens, and this is what happens if Y happens. And it's sort of one of the
Hmm.
reasons I write, like, what would happen if? But I don't
Yeah.
want to have to die, get cancer, be cheated on. Like, I don't want any of the
Yeah.
things to happen to me that happen
Hmm.
to them, be facing jail time. Like, none of those things would
Right.
I ever want to
Yeah.
do. But I do want to know more about the experience of people who do that. So,
Hmm.
in terms of like, since we're talking about the normal gossip, when you were reading as a kid, what were you looking for?
I was looking for friends. Like,
Oh, okay.
that sounds like so bad. I went to a school, kindergarten through eighth grade, with a very, very small class. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you do the Clifton Strengths thing with Becca Syme, where like you
Yes,
figure out, yeah,
I think we
I'm
all
very,
did.
very, I know, I love it so much. Like that's honestly the first advice I give to new writers is figure out what your process is. And if you need help, like sign up for the Better Faster Academy, go take some classes, learn to embrace who you are, because that's going to make your whole journey a lot less convoluted.
Yes, I think I did it. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're
but
looking for friends.
I'm very high relator, and I was in
Uh,
such a small school, and like I didn't know this when I was in grade school, clearly.
mhm.
But looking back in retrospect, it's like I was finding friends in the books because I didn't have the people that I connected with in school because there was such a small pool of
How small
people,
was it? Because
you
my
know.
son's K6 was 16 kids, 17
Yeah,
kids.
I graduated. I think I was one of 13 when we
No, it's even
graduated,
smaller.
eighth grade.
17 now
And
seems
it
like
was
a
like, you know,
gigantic.
in like the small, like kindergarten, first grade, it was like 25 to 30 kids, but like it just gradually dropped off. And so by the
Same,
time, yeah,
same.
by the
Yeah.
time like we lived half an hour from the library, half an hour? We lived half a mile. We lived half a mile from a public library. And so as soon as I was old enough to stay home by myself in the summer, I would
Hmm.
read 2 books from the library, ride my bike to the library, swap out for 4 books, go home, read 2 books that afternoon, read 2 books in the morning, lather, rinse, repeat, you know? And it
Right.
was like, it was my social life for the whole entire summer. And I
Did you
loved it.
find your people in books? Because that's,
Yeah.
well, we're not going to get
Yeah.
into representation and all that, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I'm a cis white het woman. I
Yeah.
see
I'm
myself
gonna,
everywhere. That's,
yeah, to me, I think it was more a look into. I didn't get that sense from books, but that's a different. I'd have to
hmm
really think about it because I was looking. I was just nosy. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just
yeah.
Relator's
Yeah.
not on. I think Relator's one of those things is at the bottom, like next to Woo, and I'm like I don't even know what this is. Um, no, mine is no. It's like mine is input, discipline, like and then all of the
hmm
like intellection ones are the ones at the top. So I spend a lot of time thinking about
Yeah.
things, not so
Yeah.
much doing or talking to anybody about it.
hmm
Okay, so what were your favorite books as a kid?
I loved Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden, which I think is super old because that definitely even predated me
Hmm.
when I was reading them. And I loved Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary and E.B. White. And I mean, like when I was young, that was what you were given to read,
Yes.
in those elementary school years. It's so fun watching my kids now because they're like fifth grade, seventh grade,
Hmm.
10th grade. Sorry, I had to do math.
Yeah, I know.
And my fifth grader is avid bookworm, and they get to read so much more freely in school now.
This
So
is
she'll be like,
true.
"Yeah, I get to like read Rick Riordan," and she came home with a book, and she's like, "Look, the PTA gave me a present because I'm a fifth grader. They sent it home with me," and I found out later like the PTA gave the same book to everyone, and she finished it. And she says, "That was the most horrible book I have ever read in my life because they died."
Oh God.
It's like she would not have picked that one. She would not have picked that one on her own. She did read it, but yeah, it
No,
just didn't feel like there were. Oh,
no.
Babysitter Club, yeah, and
I
like
feel like I'm too
Sweet
old for
Valley
that. Oh, you must be in
Twins.
the Sweet Valley High. Yeah,
I
yeah.
was always told Sweet Valley High was too mature for me, and so I never started it, even in high school.
But it was very like
I'm
it's like
sure it was.
it's like TV sitcom. Like there's no, I don't want to say there's no depth. There's no depth.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
every like I swear to God, because I used to buy the books. Like if they feel like they were expensive, but I did like shell
Mhm.
it out of my allowance. The once several months, I
Yeah.
don't know. I had
Yes.
50, and then my mother cut me off. She was like, "Do you need 51?" And I mean,
You're like,
most books I took
yes, I
from
do.
the and most books I got from the library, but I became a completist about series books. And so
Yes.
you'd buy it, and I swear to God, the book is probably 40,000 words. Like as an adult, I see that, but
Yeah.
it was Jessica and Elizabeth. I know,
Yes. Oh
and
my
they,
gosh.
one was goodish and one was baddish, and they sometimes would
hmm
switch, and then there was a guy, but it was really like pretty tame.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
feel like Judy Blume was a lot more depth, especially the books that, like,
Especially like
like
Forever.
Wifey or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
forever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
But
found
then,
Forever at my neighbor's house and I read it and I was like, I don't think I was supposed to do that. Like there was a ton of guilt because of Sweet Valley High. was
Mhm.
too much for me, then I can promise you that at 11 or 12 years old, my parents would have been horrified.
Wait, so when did you start reading romance? Because I started reading romance about, hold on, let me think. I have to think. I was 12, 13. I remember. I mean, I can see myself in my room,
Mhm.
but I remember reading. And because of the age I was, so it was like 1983, 84.
Mhm.
Romance was pretty tame. I didn't know that historical had sex, and I didn't read historical. Actually, I still kind of don't.
Mhm.
But they started ratcheting up the sex and ratcheting down the abusive man trope, or the sort of a-hole hero
Yeah.
or alpha hole or whatever.
Yeah.
But were they too mature? Let me say this. When I was a kid, if you had a book in your hand, nobody said anything to you.
Yeah.
So as long as I was reading, I remember people asking me about the covers, because we didn't have covers and all, there's no Kindle and all
Right.
that. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you're reading that?" And I don't think nobody ever said Battleship. I only heard that later in life. Nobody said
Mhm.
anything. They just were like, "Oh," and then they would go do their thing and leave
Yeah.
me and sit in the room
Yeah.
reading.
Yep.
Were they too mature? I think about this now because there's a lot of discussion about whether or not romance, and in the case now, I was talking about Disney princesses and that kind of thing, but there are fewer of those
Mhm.
movies when I was a kid than there are now.
Yeah, and
Having
they were
a
very
negative,
heavily,
yeah,
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 focused on
having a negative
romance.
effect on women's perception of how they should be treated by men. And
Mhm.
I don't like, I spend, well, not too much time thinking about it. It's one of the things that sort of crosses my mind from time to time, and I can never land on whether or not, because I think for the most part, we all know, like, and I'm putting quotes around this, that books
Mhm.
are fantasy. And one of the
Yeah.
things that, like, another author I know always says is that, like, if you look at books that men read, nobody thinks that you're joining the FBI or going on an adventure.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Or you're
and
not
they're all
solving, yeah, you're not solving crimes in your spare time. Yeah.
crimes in your spare time while swinging from a building or whatever.
Finding dead bodies all over the place. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my God. So in my head, though, they were fairly equivalent, but and I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I do talk to more people now as an adult who are like, "Well, I thought he was coming to save me or whatever." And I'm like, I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know if I thought that was true,
Yeah.
or if family affects you more. But
Yeah.
I have put no embargo on my child's reading, but I have heard some things that
Mhm.
I'm just like, I don't know. He reads a lot of dystopian.
Mhm. Mhm.
And like he was reading some book where they like harvest children.
Oh my
And
God.
I
My,
know it's some series. Where
can I
they
tell
harvest.
you,
Mhm.
my
Yeah,
daughter has figured out that she loves the romance part of books, right? And
that's so
she's my
interesting.
fifth grader,
Mhm.
and she it cracks me up. She started like, she'll be like, Mom, I was reading this book and the boy likes the girl and the girl doesn't know it and she likes him too. And she just gets so excited. And I was like, sweetheart, that's the romance part. That's what your mama writes. And she's
I
like,
know how.
oh, really? So she starts telling all of her friends. She's like, I like the romance part of a book. So then she has a birthday party and her friend shows up. She's like, I got you a book. And my daughter's like, oh, I'm so excited. This is awesome. She opens the book. It is The Hunger Games.
Oh my god,
It's like, it has romance in it.
that's hilarious. My son
Like,
loved that.
accurate. And also, I was like,
So
oh, this book is going to wreck her. And she finished it and it wrecked her. And she was like, can I get the other two, please? so, so, yeah, I hear you on like, we don't really like tell them they can or can't read anything in particular. It's just kind of
mhm.
like, be around and available,
To
ready to
have those
answer the hard
conversations,
questions.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where we are now. Like,
Yeah.
also they're harvesting children. What do you think about? There's so many of those books, like the dystopian ones. They
Yeah.
all seem. There's one called like Starters and Enders, and they were borrowing children's
Hmm.
bodies. I mean,
Oh
there's
my
so
God.
many. It's actually really interesting. We read them during the pandemic. I mean, I read them.
Hmm.
Sometimes I read the same book. Sometimes I don't. I can only read so many of those.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
they do lead to fairly interesting conversations, which is, I think,
Oh,
for
for sure.
me as a parent, that's the important part. What the book is about
Hmm.
itself, I don't know. I just want him to
Yep.
read more. I mean, he reads not as much
Yeah.
as I ever did as a kid, and he's an only
Hmm.
child too, but I want him to read mainly because, to be honest, I just want him to read more and have familiarity with English words and stuff. Like, that's a different, like, pedagogical reason. He didn't learn to read until third grade. I nearly lost my mind. And
Oh.
the thing is, like, and people kept saying to me, "It's okay. Like, it's okay." I learned to read at like
Hmm.
3, so the like space
Oh
between
yeah.
3 and 8 is
It's
huge.
vastly, yeah. Yeah.
And so he didn't read, didn't care, like just
Mm-hmm.
didn't care. And so now he reads. It's so funny because he reads out loud to me, like especially when we're sitting in the car and he's got to tell me what somebody's, like he Googles things as
Mm-hmm.
we're driving. And he
Yeah.
reads perfectly. And it's so interesting to me that he can read words that he heard, but it did not see very often. But I do want him to read
Yeah.
because I'd want him to have greater familiarity with English words and improve his
Yeah.
spelling. But that's neither here nor there.
Oh, the spelling thing, it cracks me up. I'm like, you read 38 hours a day and
Right.
you spelled the wrong. You know?
I don't understand. Like, maybe they're taking in information different than me because my
I
spelling
think so.
is very good. I mean, that's one of the
Yeah.
things I do.
Yeah.
And so, like, we were just
Undoubtedly.
sitting here the other day, and he's like, "How do you spell something?" And I was like, "Oh, come on now!" But I didn't say that. But as a parent, I thought it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Now we're
No,
down the
but it's
rabbit
fine.
hole.
It is. And it's like we all like learn at different rates, and
Mhm.
how you, like, whether or not you're good at spelling does not dictate like where you're
Whether
going to
you're
go
good
in
at
life.
life, I
Yeah.
know. And so, all of these thoughts I'm sharing, I have in my head while
Yeah.
smiling and kissing him on the head. But I do have, he's 14, but I do have
Yeah.
all these thoughts and I struggle with it as a parent, but I try to back away
Mm-hmm.
because my parents would have been like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. But we had spelling tests
Yeah.
every week. So it's different.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's just different kind of emphasis. I'm crossing my fingers that it's all going to be okay, especially if he spends
Mm-hmm.
2 hours a week on TikTok. Now,
Yeah. It will.
okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, so the reason I'm going to get distracted, let me focus. Okay,
Okay.
so the reason
I'm
I
ready.
wanted to talk to you is as I was saying to you, like before we started recording, I remember sitting next to you at this brunch or whatever. I think it was in Houston at the first Ram.
I think
And I'm
so.
not,
I
I
think that's
know
when
we
we met.
shared
Yeah.
that room. It's the only time I shared a room recently with that thing at the beach, but I feel like that was a different year.
No, I think
I'm
that
not,
was the same year.
I think it was the same year. Oh, so it
It
must
was
have been the second
either
Ram.
it was. I went to the
Because
first and second Ram. So, but I only shared a room with you the second Ram. I think that was the second Ram. Because
right,
because
that
the
I
second
know.
Ram it had to be because I had already. Yeah. Yes, it's decided. Like we met the first one. We shared a room the second one. I'm sure that's the way it went.
No, that's actually true. That's actually true. But in my head, because Houston is not a place I go like independently. I think those are
Hmm.
only 2 or 3 times I've been. Like, so in
Yeah.
my head, it's all one block of time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Well, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I remember. So we went to some restaurant down the street. I remember this part. And there was a
Hmm.
brunch. And you were like, oh, I write like romantic comedies, Jamie Farrell, but I'm
Hmm.
looking to like switch and like start a new pen name.
Yeah.
And I literally was like, that's interesting. And you're like, I should have
Yeah.
gotten a tag, the name tag. I remember you saying this. I should have gotten a name tag with the new pen name, not the old pen name.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, I don't even know what was on my name tag then. I may have been writing under some other name as well. It may have been Silly
Hmm.
Fox. Who the hell knows what it was? And so
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
think it
that
was.
is, yeah, I think so too. Nobody's doing those anymore. And it was and I was like, this is interesting. But many people, you were in the romance community. Many people change names, change genres, do lots of
Yep.
things all the time. So
They
you
do.
sort of clock it and move on.
Hmm.
Because it's not my life. And, I don't have a deep, like, dive into other people's things. I got to write all day and drink the tea and the water and the wine. So I don't have time. But then I remember, I'm trying to think what happened. It was probably when we were doing the Zooms during, I don't know, COVID or whatever. It's so
Oh
hard to
yeah.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. That it's when the Pippa took off. I
Yeah.
feel like, well, no, I'll ask you, what year was that? Because if the first Ram was probably 2018, when did you
Yeah.
launch Pippa?
I launched Pippa in the fall of 2017. So Pippa was doing reasonably well in the fall of 2018, but then 2019 is when Pippa just absolutely exploded into the stratosphere and like blew all of my wildest dreams and expectations out of the water.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When
Mhm.
did you start writing romance?
I
Writing and publishing,
started,
not just,
so I discovered romance novels basically as a newlywed when I was like 22. I graduated college. I decided I wanted to get back into reading. I found Janet Ivanovich. Janet Ivanovich led me to Jennifer Cruzy. Jennifer Cruzy led me to like Linda Howard and Julia Quinn and Lisa Kleypas, and I was hooked, right? And so
Okay.
I had wanted to write books when I was a kid. Like I was reading Beverly Cleary, and I
Mhm.
wanted to write the next Ramona Quimby when I was like 8 years old.
Mhm.
So I did. I started writing a story when I was 8 years old, and it was every bit as like good or bad, as you would expect an 8-year-old story to be. And I remember my parents read it and they laughed. And I was mortified. And so I set it aside. But then I graduated college with an engineering degree. I got married. We spent a year in Minneapolis while my husband finished his degree. And then he commissioned into the Air Force. And we ended up living in Pensacola, Florida, where I couldn't find a job. I had student loans. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anything about military life. Everything was brand new. I ended up working at a Walden Books in the mall. And it started selling calendars in the calendar kiosk that they had at the holidays. And I was getting a discount on all the books. And so my entire paycheck went to books every single time. And about that time, I started writing as self-therapy. And so after a couple years, like reading romance novels and writing sort of merged. And I started writing romance novels. I joined Romance Writers of America. I made friends. I joined an online chapter because in the military, you move around a lot. Yeah. And it just sort of went from there. So I am also a dinosaur. I predate the Kindle. Like I was querying agents and editors before Amazon ever unveiled the Kindle.
Well, yeah, so was I. I mean, I'm old, but I mean, not, I want to say old. I am what I am. I'm old. I'm 52, so I am what I am.
I mean, I'm in my mid 40s, like in publishing terms, like we're the dinosaurs.
I know. Somebody said it to me the other day and she's like, you're a dinosaur. I'm like, I feel like I just started. She was like, but I met you in 2006. I'm like, you have a point.
Oh, I've realized just like I've been seeing I've been perusing social media more than I should. And I've been seeing a lot of posts from new authors who have questions about things. And I'm like, oh my God, like I never even questioned that. I just knew how to do it. Like, how is it that like you realize at some point, like just how much information you have amassed over the years?
Osmosis, because I remember going to my first RWA thing. So I went to it was San Francisco and I lived in LA, and so it was close. I mean, I could fly, and really fast. And but 2006 is not, or was it 2004? I don't know. I didn't have any kids, and it was like you learn so much through osmosis just by going to these things, and I never realized how much I know. I know people call me and ask me questions and I can answer off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Oh, and then like I was talking about like the Whisper Network and agents, right? Like there are certain agent names that like if I see them on a list and like you just like cringe because you've been around so long that you're like, oh, I know the history there.
Yeah,
I know the gossip there, and you're like, wait, people don't know this.
Who said you? Not that guy. No.
I love my agent. I just want to clarify, like I do have an agent and she is fantastic and wonderful. And I am not at all disparaging her. She is fantastic and amazing. And also like frequently it is a matter of like, is this a good fit for me? Is this not a good fit for me? But then there are still some people that that are in our arena who have behaved poorly in the past and done things that should not be done. And I'm a one shot and you're done type person. I'm like, you have lost my trust. There are enough other people in this industry. Like no, I do not need to give you a second chance. I'm moving on. I'm also a very kind person, I swear.
No, but I think that's fair. Like, I will say this. Like, I had a thought, like a few years ago, I forget who I gave a second chance to, and it was a mistake. And then I called everyone. Like, I had this revelation. You love to have a revelation like 45, right? So I had this revelation where I was like, I don't think I've ever given anyone a second chance where it's worked out. So then I started calling everyone. I remember calling like Theodora. I called everyone I knew. And I was like, have you ever given anyone a second chance and it's worked out? And they're like, no. And I was like, oh, then I don't think I ever need to give anybody a second chance ever again. Like, because all it has brought for like, and I was talking to a friend about this who hired somebody and they did something and they gave them a second chance and it brought more heartache. You know what I mean? So like the first mistake or whatever, error, whatever, in judgment was small, but then the second one cost them money. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, okay. So no. So I don't give anyone a second chance. And I know somebody sent me an email deleting old Gmails because it was full. And I was reading some old email and they're like, you never gave me a second chance. And I was like, so then I sit down and Google them and I was like, yeah, I'm good.
I think that everybody needs a second chance, but that second chance doesn't have to come from me.
That's a
like maybe they're going
lovely
to
way
be
of putting it. I love
they're
that.
going to be a better fit for someone else to give them that second chance. And like I work with amazing people who have been on my
Mhm.
team for a very long time, and I love them to pieces and I trust them implicitly, and I don't think they'll ever need a second chance. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yes,
Like
exactly.
we're just the right fit. The
I
way we
had this
work works well together.
Yeah, I had this conversation about somebody who was trying to hire a nanny, and then I forget what the person did they were trying to hire. She didn't show up, or she
Hmm.
flaked out, or she had a bad reference, or used a friend as a reference and lied about it. Whatever. There was something like kind of
Hmm.
fishy.
Yeah.
And they're like, should I give her a second chance? And I was like, regarding children? I mean, I'm not saying that's more important
Yeah.
than everything in the world, but I was like, no.
No, but it is.
And she was like, but what? She was like, how did you hire a nanny? And I was like, I hired her based on, to be honest, and this is probably not the best thing, I had such a good feeling about her
Yeah.
that and I do know wrong. I'm going to see her tomorrow at her
Hmm.
grandchildren's christening. But
Aww.
I know it's twins too. But anyway, so I have two little gifts, not one little gift.
Aww.
Um, so, and I love her to death. Like, I mean, obviously I've known her 14 years or whatever, but
Hmm.
I now, like I read The Gift of Fear a few years ago, and there's a couple other books in
Oh.
that vein that suggests
Hmm.
that whatever your first impression is like 99% right.
Yeah.
And the later you get more information, we tend to take in a lot of information and like try to disprove our original, especially if we have a bad feeling.
Yeah.
But our
Yeah.
bad feeling is always right. And I'm going with that
Yeah.
now in life. Like,
Yeah.
and it's the same as a second chance. Okay. All that
Hmm.
said. So, but what made you, I get so easily distracted. But what made you, how many books had you written as Jamie before you
I
decided to
Oh,
branch out?
that's a really good question. Hold on, let me think a minute.
Mhm.
I think I had 5 books out in my Misfit Bride series, 2 books out in the Officers Ex-Wives Club series, and I had done a Kindle Worlds book. So is
Oh,
that
wow. Okay.
8?
Yeah.
I think I had 8 books as Jamie that I had written in. I launched my first Jamie Farrell book in August of 2023. And
Wait, no, 2023? No.
2013.
Am I
Sorry,
with the same
my
date? Was
bad.
that last year? Okay.
That was last
So
year. I don't know what year it is. I can't
that's
tell the
okay.
story anymore. Like we've passed a decade, everything has started over from scratch.
I know,
No,
right?
no, 2013. So
Okay.
11 years ago, I launched. Is this 2024? Am I doing my math right?
Yes.
It's
Yes,
really
it is.
embarrassing for a former engineer, although I say I'm recovering. So no, 11 years ago, I launched that. And I had super young children at home. My husband worked really long hours. Like, we moved from Florida to Alabama. We spent 10 months in Alabama, and then we moved to Washington, D.C. So I published my first book right after we moved to Alabama. My
Mhm.
youngest was like 6 months old, right?
Wow.
Like,
Okay.
super young kids, like only one was school age. So we were like finding preschools so I could have like 3 to 4 hours a day, 2 to 3 times a week to
I
write.
remember that era. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just really, really hard. Like when I see people starting now and they have young children, I just want to hug them. And I want to be like, this is hard. I know this
Mhm.
is hard. You are going to get through this and everything's going to be okay, no matter how hard you feel like this is today. Like,
Mhm.
be kind to yourself. Don't lose hope. Like, this is not the end all be all.
Mhm.
Um, because that's how I
So,
felt. It was like, I knew that I was writing good books.
mhm.
Like I got a Starred Publishers Weekly review on one of them, right? So like that's
Right.
an objective measure. I was writing good enough books and they
Right.
just weren't selling well. And in the summer of 2017, my husband finished up his assignment in the DC area. We moved to Dayton, Ohio, and I
Oh, that
quit.
was I have one friend who has an Air Force husband, and that was his last assignment. It was Dayton.
Yeah. Yeah, that was ours too. Was Dayton was our last assignment before he retired and we moved to our
Mhm.
forever home.
Right.
So we moved and I quit writing. I was like, I quit, I give up. I'm spending 50 to 60 hours a week away from my family to break even. And like the
Right.
money is not all of it, but when you're looking at like the sacrifice that it takes to be in this arena
Right.
and to work hard as a self-published author, as an indie author, like that's a lot of time away from your family. And I was like, I really need to look at what my priorities are because I'm not going to spend my kid's entire childhood working 50 to 60 hours a week for
Mhm.
no financial benefit. Like I need
Right.
to feel like I'm contributing to the family if this is how much I'm spending on this, right?
Right.
And I was burnt out. I was tired. The DC life was amazing in a lot of ways, and it was absolutely exhausting in other ways. So I would leave my house to take, I would walk one kid to the bus stop. I would take another kid 10 minutes away to a preschool. And then the third kid needed to go to a different preschool because of age requirements and the kind of daycare that we could provide, that we could afford at the time. Because we were a single income family. And like the military did, like, they have a housing allowance that they adjust based on where you're living, but like it's still 3 kids. It's tight, you know? It would take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to get my kids everywhere just so I could sit down at Starbucks and write for 3 hours. And that was for like a couple of years in the DC area. And I was just tired. So when we moved to Ohio, like we bought we bought a house. It's not our first house, but we bought a house. And I was like, I'm just going to paint the walls. I'm going to not even worry about writing because I'm tired. But then I got the bug. I got the itch. I was like, I want to do it. And I started researching the charts and I started sampling what was there. And I don't know if you remember much about like the summer of 2017 and Kindle Unlimited, but people had figured out that if you put 10 books in a single book package,
the book stuffing,
the book stuffing, you could make a lot of money, right? And I like to say there's a book for every reader and a reader for every book. I was definitely not the reader for the books that were sitting at the top of the charts, and it made me mad. It made me so mad because I was like, I write books that are good. Like Publishers Weekly has said so. My reviews say so. I've like been nominated for awards, and like it sounds so arrogant when I say it.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean,
I'm like, how do you judge if your book is good enough, you know? And like there are people who are going to be like, why did your books get nominated for awards? Your books suck, right? Because like we all see them differently, and that's fine. But like I knew I was competitive in the market. I guess that's a better way to say it. Like I knew that I should be competitive in the market, and I just got so mad, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. An election is like my number 9. So that one, and I'm like number 1 responsibility, number 6 achiever, number 5 restorative, which is like problem solving strength, right? Like geeking out on strengths for a minute here. I was basically built to take on the challenge of, well, fine. If that's what they want, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it better. And this is something like if you take Becca Syme's classes, she's like, don't do this. Like, fine, I'm going to do it better. That's exactly what I did. But I didn't say I'm going to do it better. I was like, I'm going to do it my way. And I switched from writing in third person past to first person present. And it's like I found my voice. And I wrote that first book like no one was going to read it. So there was no fear. There was no fear at all that someone in my family would disapprove, that someone would laugh at me, that I would like have a massive plot hole and whatever, like any bad thing that could ever happen. It wasn't going to happen because I was writing for me. I was not writing for publication. But then I sent it to my editor and she was like, so you're going to publish this? And I was like, so my husband just like took a command position and his office knows my pen name. And this book has a really steamy elevator hate sex scene. No, I'm not going to publish this. And she's like, you are up to take a pen name. And she was right. Like, I was like, fine, I'm going to do it. I settled on a pen name. I hired someone to help me get my covers in order because I knew that wasn't my strong suit. Right. Let me back up just a second. When my husband took command in the military, one of the things he had to do was go to commander training. And they had the spouses go along so that we could go. Basically, I joked that it was officers' wives training, but and it essentially was. I got yelled at, officer spouses training, and he's right, officer spouses training. And we had our own track during commander school where we learned a lot of like what our spouses would be going through as commanders, some situations they might face, like how to interact with higher level spouses or whatever. There's just a lot. But as part of it, we had a general come speak to us every morning. And one morning he told us a story about a young captain who was just always super positive attitude. And he liked her a lot. And at one point he said, he's like, how do you do it? Like, how do you come in and face every day with just this like happy, positive, fearless attitude? And she was like, well, sir, I am just fearlessly me. And I was like, oh,
that's great.
you should be fearlessly you. And then I was like, to me, I should be fearlessly me. And like my eyes got round, and my husband's sitting next to me and he goes, oh, shoot.
Something's a brewing.
That was not good. She did not need to hear that. Like we were walking around later that day and he like nudges me and he's like, hey, your name tag's on upside down. And I just looked at him and I went, I am being fearlessly me. Thank you very much. And like another morning at command school, I don't remember what it was called. Anyway, but another morning, I do remember he said, one of your jobs as a commander is going to be realizing you can't do it all. And one of your jobs as a spouse is realizing you cannot do it all. Like if you are not a person who likes to host teas, find someone else to do it, right? Mm-hmm. If you are not a person who likes running the meal trains for baby showers right. and sick spouses and whatever, he's like, find someone else to do it. You do not have to do it all. This is where like, it was like, do what only you can do. And that was like the second half of that. Like these are the two big things that I took away that basically changed our lives. Be fearlessly you and do only what you can do, which circles us back to, I hired someone to help me figure out what my covers should be, mm-hmm. what my branding should be. I decided to launch with a newsletter that was sent once a week. Mm-hmm. And people were like, oh my God, you can't do that. That's way too much. You can't be in people's inboxes every week. They'll unsubscribe. And I was like, Shutterfly emails me every single day. I think.
Yeah. For me, it's Nordstrom. I forget twice a day. I'm like, do we need to? But I don't unsubscribe.
Yes. I'm like, if there are companies that are emailing you 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times every single day, I think that I can remind people that my name exists once a week in their inbox. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because now the number of people who do weekly emails, and this is like 6 years later,
skyrocketed,
right? Yeah. It is. It's massive. Mm-hmm. It's massive. And I went into the Pippa Grant name with like a very clear plan using all of the lessons that I had learned the hard way with my Jamie Farrell brand. I was like, I'm going to correct them all mm-hmm. and I'm going to be fearlessly me and we're going to do this. And so I published Mr. McCarty and I put it in Kindle Unlimited because frankly, I was tired. Mm-hmm. Like part of me went into Kindle Unlimited because that's where all those books that were sitting at the top of the charts were. But the other part was managing 5 or 6 different platforms mm-hmm. is exhausting.
I do it all the time. It is. I don't disagree. I don't disagree because I want to update the back cover copy of a mm-hmm. book that's on pre-order. And I was like, mm-hmm. okay, so I do the thing that Theodore always said, which is like find something mindless to watch like on streaming and do it then. And that's what I did. I was like, okay, okay.
Yep. Yeah, but it is. It's a lot of work. And I was tired. I was burnt out. I was tired. So I was like, forget this. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to be on Kindle Unlimited because it's easy. It's simple. And that's where the people who are at the top of the charts are sitting. Right. And 7 months later, I hit the top 100 mm-hmm. with my 6th book.
Okay.
I went from releasing 8 books as Jamie Farrell in 4 years to releasing 19 books in 26 months as Pippa Grant.
Oh my God. I don't even know how you do it.
It was a lot.
So can I ask you, because I don't know, your trajectory is different than 90% of the people I know. So people,
yeah.
Well, no.
This is not normal.
No, there are a lot of people, and whether this is timing or the book, I'm not going to, that's a whole conversation, mm-hmm. but there were a number of 2012 people. I was still with the publisher in 2012. We are where we are. And mm-hmm. I don't have regrets. I see what happened. But there are mm-hmm. a lot of 2012 people who got big from the beginning. And so
super
they
fast.
Don't have that.
You don't have the struggle experience.
Correct. So you made it, and I'm not saying people need to struggle in life. I'm not on the struggle mm-hmm. bus. Like you should be on the struggle bus. But I will say that I do find it interesting that you were very deliberate in your relaunch. So let me ask you this. Yeah. What would you say the Jamie Farrell brand is?
The Jamie Farrell brand is like Pippa Grant light.
Mm-hmm. So less comedy or less sex?
It's less sex. Mm-hmm. It's a little lighter on the comedy. Like they're still really funny, mm-hmm. but those books were written to try to please an editor or an agent with TradPub. because
Yeah.
my mindset was it is good enough if it's good enough for TradPub. The reason I published my first Jamie Farrell book was because I started getting rejections from agents and editors that said, this book is fabulous. I love it. I wish I could take it on. However, we don't want anything that's not the next 50 Shades of Grey. And this is too quirky and funny and light.
Yeah.
So all of those books were written, even though I was self-publishing them, they were written with an eye toward, I want this to feel like a traditionally published book. And third person past tense is what traditional publishers are publishing.
Very much.
Like, I should pull back a little bit here because like traditional publishing doesn't go quite as far as where I would want to go, you know? And I was writing to please someone else when I was writing the Jamie Farrell books, and I enjoyed them. Don't get me wrong. Like, I enjoyed them. I was proud of them, but they were like an 85 to 90% authentic experience. Whereas like with Pippa Grant, I just unplugged everything. And I let all of like, what is it the kids say? I let my freak flag fly.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
Like I just let all the quirkiness come out. I didn't hold back. I probably hold back more now than I did when I first launched. But I've built a readership and I've come a little bit back to center in some ways. So it's like a meld now of my favorite parts of the Jamie Farrell books with my favorite parts of the Pippa Grant books. So it's different, but in a good way.
Okay. So okay. And I don't mean this the way it's going to maybe sound. Given
I will not be offended.
I know, I'm trying to like to do this. Okay, you were deliberate about changing names and launching and branding and covers. I remember the conversation like in 20 whatever year it was. But I guess the question is, were you surprised, or were you surprised about the success?
Oh my gosh, yes. I was shocked.
So even though you deliberately went in trying to be, I don't want to say trying to be more successful, trying to be more cohesive. No. That's the word I want.
So let me think of how to say this. My goal with my writing. So I graduated college in the early 2000s with a degree in computer engineering, right? And at that time, like, you get a job and you're going to get an offer for like $50,000 a year, right? And I was like, I want my books to replicate the income that I would have made as an entry-level engineer. I was like, that is my definition of success.
Right.
I have blown that so far out of the water, and it's astonishing. Like, I always think there are limits on things. There are practically no limits to how many readers you can find these days. I mean, like, clearly we're limited by the fact that there are 8 billion people on the planet or whatever, right?
But like, not all of them speak English, or translations notwithstanding and all that. Yeah.
And like, as far as like big fish go, I'm a little fish in the big fish pond. I'm a big fish in the overall indie publishing pond and publishing market right now. And I hope that doesn't sound arrogant. It's just
no, but it's true. Because I'll tell you, because I have another question that I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask it now. Because one of the things that so when I was talking to my Hungarian tutor, he was like, "What are you doing today?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to interview this author." And I said, the thing that's not the most interesting thing. I don't have a good vocabulary in Hungarian, so now here we go.
Favorite, and everything is the biggest. It's okay. I get it.
Yeah, I know. So, and he said, "Oh, why?" I said, "Well, the most interesting thing about her is that she debuts at number 1, and I find that fascinating because I don't."
Not every book does it.
No, but a lot do.
Yeah, I've had 4 that have hit number 1. Yeah.
Every so often I like log in and I was like, oh, Pippa's at number 1 today. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I just look to see
when it happens. I'm not even gonna lie, it feels good. Like, I shouldn't say this, but it's so true. So I am a high achiever, right? And one of the things about being an achiever is that you're always looking for the next accomplishment, right? Like, you're like, I have leveled up. What is the next mountain? Like, if you've watched Taylor Swift's documentary, Miss Americana, I felt a lot of what she said in my soul, because she talked about how, like, she was so young when she won her Grammys, and then she was like, well, what's next?
Right.
And it's so weird because now, like, we've seen what Taylor Swift did in the last year, and we're like, oh, that's what was next, you know?
Okay, exactly.
But there's this, like, the first time I hit number one, it sort of broke my brain a little because, like, my entire career, I'd been like, okay, I hit number 5. Can I hit number 4?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I hit number 4. Can I hit number 3? You know? And then all of a sudden I was like, I hit number 1. Can I, oh God, where do we go next? Like, what's my next big goal? And like, it's so weird because I'm so grateful for the success. I'm so grateful for the readers who show up. Like, I don't want to sound ungrateful for any of this, but it's also like a bit of a mind trip to be like, oh, well, what is my next big goal? You know?
Can I ask you, because I know there's another author who now, I will not name because I'm going to go into the discussion, but she hit number 1 with several books in KU. And for her, the next thing to do was to go wide to see if she could hit well wide. And to be honest, like now I think she had a book come out. I don't know if I checked, I didn't check to see where she was wide because, I got things to do. But is that at all like something you want to do? I'm not saying there's something to be like, I'm not going to get into the KU versus wide debate. I've always been wide. That's a different, thought. But is that like, then that is a good question. Then what's next? Because you can sell, you can be 1 and sell 1 million or be 1 and sell 1 billion. Like that's not, that is
100% accurate.
Right. There's no wiggle room there.
Like, it's like authors we're not each other's competition.
No.
But chart space, there is competition for chart space.
Yes.
And if you launch the same day as somebody who's more popular than you, it doesn't matter if you've hit number 1 before. If they have more readers than you, they're going to hit number 1. And you're going to be number 2. Like, so you can sell just the way it is.
You can sell 1 billion and they're number 1. And it's not that you're not selling 1 million, but then... yes. And so that's why you don't launch on Tuesday in September.
Yeah. Like Frida McFadden at number 1 is going to sell a crap ton more books than Pippa Grant at number 1. I can just tell you that right now. But like, so I'm going to answer your question. I think I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to do it in an interesting way. And then I'm going to get done. You're going to be like, no, Pippa, that didn't answer my question at all. But we're going to go there. I have a friend who talks about financial matters for authors. And about 10 years ago, I was at a workshop that she did. So this is like prime Jamie Farrell days before Pippa Grant existed. And in the middle of the workshop, she had us do this exercise where she's like, write down your like 5 high in the sky, never going to happen goals. Right. And I was like, okay, win a Rita. Cause it's when RWA's like big prize with the Rita.
Right.
It's like, I want to hit the New York Times list. I want to write 50 books. I want to like, I don't even remember. Right. So we get done with this list of 5 and she goes, now make a list of 5 even bigger goals. And I was like, oh crap. Like,
oh, wow.
I just like put all my pie in the sky goals. And so it really made me think. And like, you sit there for a few minutes, you write like even bigger goals. And I was like, write 100 books, launch at number 1 at the New York Times with every single book and like make $7 million and, like all the big things. Right. And she's like, we finished. And she's like, great, do it again. And I was like, like the next thing you know, I'm writing like, make enough money with my writing that I can rent out Disney World for a day and take my whole entire family there, like buy a private island and just like crazy, insane stuff. Right. I went back and I looked at my list. I found it about 3 years ago and I pinged her and I was like, do you remember that? And she was like, of course I remember that.
Right.
And I said, I've met like half of my goals on this list. And they're like, not the goals that I've listed right now. Clearly I've never rented out like Disney World. But I went through and I had actually marked off some from each of the 3 columns. And I was shocked and I was like, oh, well, this just tells me like, so when I hit number 1 and I was like, what's next? I was like, I'm going to go back to that exercise and I'm going to be like, if there is no limit, like, what do I want to do?
Wow. Okay.
What are my goals? And like professional and non-professional too. And how are they going to impact, like, how am I going to steer my professional life so that I can reach them? I'm a big believer in manifestation. I'm a big believer in manifestation. And so like, you can't just sit there and wish for it though. Like, I'm also a believer in hard work.
Right.
So yeah, I think that the reason Pippa Grant became so successful was just, it was partially timing. Like there's anybody who tells you there's not an element of luck to success does not understand. There's an element of luck to success, you know?
Very much so. Like you couldn't have
I
done this necessarily 20 what year? Oh God, I hate to say myself, 20 years ago.
no, and you know, my first
the structure didn't
no,
exist.
you couldn't have. Exactly. And like my first book that hit number one, Amazon cleared out all of those people who were book stuffing a month before that book launched.
Okay.
And my book before that, when all of the book stuffers were there, hit like 124 in the store. Right. So there's a very high possibility that my book would have hit the top 100.
Right.
But I don't know that it would have hit as high. And I don't know if it would have stayed as long. So like I couldn't control the fact that Amazon suddenly removed chart competition.
Right.
And made it, and they opened up the charts for the people who had been stifled because of the book stuffing situation. You know, like I wasn't in control of that at all. I was right place, right time with the right books for the market.
Right.
And I had put a lot of time and experience, time and effort into building my craft too. And that's like part of the reason that I was able to write so many books so fast. That coupled with the fact that like my daughter went to preschool. So that opened up like legitimate working hours for me so that I could actually spend time really writing. And I had the right amount of help. And it just, everything coalesced at the same time and just made it work in a way that was super magic. And that believe me, I do not take it for granted.
So I'll ask you this because I don't have this experience actually at all. I kind of think in any aspect of my life. Do you ever, I don't want to say worry, I don't want to introduce like anxiety into your life, but.
No, it's okay. I have anxiety already.
Do you feel a pressure? This is something people talk about. Like this is, okay, let me say this. When I was a kid in school, if you started out a class getting like A's on the tests, there was this pressure to maintain that. And if you like got to be like you stayed up late reading a book instead of perhaps studying, not that this ever happened to me, you would get a B and they'd be like, but you're an A student, why aren't you doing this? And I'd be like, well, I was up last night reading like a Barbara Delinsky romance. Like I would never say that out loud, but that was the God's honest truth. And so then it felt there was some pressure, or I felt pressure, not everybody felt this maybe, to maintain a certain level of momentum. And with each successive thing you did, it felt more pressure. Do you have any of that?
Oh, absolutely. My last book came out in April. It's my favorite book I've ever written. And it peaked at number 10 at the store and rapidly fell out. And we couldn't spend enough money to keep it there in ads.
Right.
And so, yeah, like I'm feeling it right now. And it's my favorite book I've ever written. But there was just a perfect storm of other elements around it that made it not work right now. I know what some of them are. There are others that I'm unsure, like, was that a factor? I don't know if that was a factor. Like, no one can take from me the fact that I love this book with my whole heart and soul. And it is the favorite thing I've ever written in my life. And I've finished 3 books since then. Right. And I still am like, oh, I want to go back and visit with Fletcher and Goldie. But it does, like, it makes me double down on like, okay, well, we're going to figure out what we did wrong and we're going to adjust course and we're going to get back on track and I'm going to do some things right and I'm going to do some things wrong. And like the market is shifting in ways that you can't control. Right.
Right. But like, one of the things, and this is the thing I think about art all the time. Cause like, let me say this, cause I was talking to my son about this. So we're talking about people we know who like producing like direct movies or like are showrunners for TV shows, whatever. And he was, we were talking about one person, now I can't say in particular. And he was like, well, why was that person's one show successful and the next one not? And I'm like, okay, they're different shows. So so even though that showrunner is the same person in the network, I don't know if the network said or think about that. And in theory, like the conditions around it were the same. What is different is the art. So stories are not exact equivalents. I mean, I know we're like recreating a reading experience and they have a certain expectation. So it's not like you're going to throw like a cozy mystery at them and go, hey, it's the same thing. But where do you factor in the difference in the art? Because every story
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to get into whether romance is formulaic, and there are certain obvious elements. It has to have a happy ending, yada, yada,
Sure.
yada. But every story is different. So how much do you
Mm-hmm.
factor that into a different performance, separate from
It,
Amazon changed a thing, it wasn't working on Tuesday? I
right.
mean, all those things that.
Yeah, like how much of it is my fault directly? Which is like not an offensive question to me at all, because
Right.
I'm like, oh, well, if I made a mistake, like I'm happy to like figure out where I shifted gears and where I need to get back to.
Mm-hmm.
Like my best performing books have super tropey titles.
Mm-hmm.
This book was called Until It Was Love, which is not a super tropey title.
It is not. What's going on?
No, I loved it as a title for a fake dating book.
Mm-hmm.
And really it's a spite date book. And I did not,
And you didn't
like,
call it
I shouldn't
Spite
say this.
Date?
Somebody's going to, it should have been called The Spite Date.
No,
it
I'm
really
saying,
should have.
So I forget, and maybe this was at a RAM thing. It was.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was at the first RAM, and they were discussing titles, and they were like, if the title's not on the nose, the title's wrong. And it was the first. I'm reading. I just read like a couple weeks ago. This is Marketing by Seth Godin, and so like I'm thinking more about that, but I did change titles because I love like a title that alludes to what the book is about. Like as a reader, I love this. So if it's like Until It's, then I was like, well, what is this going to be about? But that's me as a reader. And as my son likes to say, you are not your readers, which is fair. So like the title, I'm like the book I'm working on now is called His Last Mistress, and it's really his last mistress. You know what I mean? Like there's literally,
that's a good title.
But you're good at separating the art from the market, because that's the thing that you perfected.
I very my books are not my babies. Right. I love them, but I'm like, oh, well, if this is a problem, it's going to change. Like my favorite title I ever had, I changed it after the book had been out for a couple of years because people didn't get it. And it didn't tell you. Right. I mean, the book's title was Master Baker.
I remember that.
And people didn't get the pun.
Right.
I had people message me and they were like, oh my God, I randomly happened to think about your book today. And so I started talking to like so-and-so about it. And then I said the title out loud and I finally got the pun in the title, like 6 months later. Right. And I was like, this one didn't land. Like the other one that I changed last year, it was called Hot Air.
I don't know what saw that.
And there was a thing in a hot air balloon and he was like the heir to a kingdom. And so it was like a total play on names.
That's
so
cute.
they are now, once I explain it. If you have to explain it, you've already lost them. That is the wrong title. Move on. But like tropey titles work for me. Really funny opening scenes make for my best-selling books.
But that all makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
and like I've seen a lot of discussion lately about like readers are starting to say, I hate tropes. Quit telling me what the trope is. Quit putting tropes in your title. And I'm like, until they stop selling,
exactly,
we will keep doing these things.
I have so many, I'm sure that you may remember, we were on a Zoom, like let's say during the COVID, and one person was discussing how can I say this kindly? They sort of ignore reader input on things like that, because what readers say they want and what people buy
and what they show up for
are two different things. And
absolutely,
many of us, not necessarily you, put stock into what people said they wanted, and then they buy something different. And you're like, well, why are you buying this book when you said you wanted that book? And they're never going to answer that question like for you.
I call it the kindergarten teacher and the single dad. Like there's no conflict. And I think that's more acceptable in today's market than it was when I would quote that 4 or 5 years ago as like my quintessential, like readers say they want the single dad and the kindergarten teacher. But like when it comes down to it, is that the book they're going to buy?
Right.
Like there has to be some really juicy conflict, because it's like, that's why I love normal gossip. Like a lot of storytelling is just gossip about people you don't know.
About people you don't know. That's the.
Yeah.
So wait, I'm going to ask you this. So I guess, okay, so I have a couple more questions, but I won't keep you longer than an hour for this. The question I ask everybody is, looking back at the books you've written, your whole collective oeuvre, as it were, what is it that what message, I don't want to make it sound like it's like an after school special, but what sort of message or what theme do you think weaves throughout?
So when people leave a Pippa Grant novel after they've flipped that last page, I want them to feel like they are okay in their own skin, because there are characters, people out there who have the same struggles that they do, who have seen things and been through the same things and come out on the other side in love. And like, I just want people to have hope. And the other thing I want is for them to leave with a smile on their face. Like, I have escaped the world for a little bit and spent some time just having joy and happiness and laughter. Like, happiness is super important to me, and I don't know why. It's probably for a discussion with my therapist.
Exactly.
But anyway, but it's also like, I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
And the world can be a dumpster fire, and I want my books to be a safe place for people to be happy and escape to. So I don't know that I necessarily have a message so much as I have a vibe that I want people to have. And just, I want them to leave my books happier than when they came into them. That's my goal.
Okay. And then what do you envision for your future? I'm not asking you for your five-year plan, but you're young enough that you can write for like another, well, not many years. But the market obviously will change. I don't anticipate in 20 or 30 years the market will be the same as it is now. Who knows? I mean, things change so rapidly. It's so crazy.
I don't think it'll be the same in 2 years as what it is now. So I will always continue to try to level up my craft and always look for ways to adjust my marketing to fit the market. No, like, the only person who cares about your career, like, no one else will love your career and care about your career as much as you do.
Yes,
and that's a hard, no matter how you're published.
Yes, but it's true.
Because even like super high, like, I would imagine even Nora Roberts, I can't believe that her publisher cares more than she does. You know,
right? And she cares, Steve.
Like, how can they? So they care a lot.
Yeah.
But can they really care as much as she does? So
no, and then they come and go, and like, I was just talking to somebody like, yeah, when I was with so and so in print, but now I'm with so and so in print, or like, I've been at all 5 publishers, and you know what I mean, and like day before yesterday, and you're like, okay, this is like a head spin, but nobody does care more than you. It's the thing we're talking about, like with hiring assistants, like earlier, and it's just I think it's a hard lesson, because you really do want people to care as much as you do, but they're going to go home and, if they're doing marketing, like, they're going to go home and do their life in their life. They're not going to necessarily be thinking about what other way can I position her book? And this is our life.
Right. Like, there's never a moment of the day where I don't feel like I am a writer.
Yes.
Or I don't feel like I'm a business person running like my own publishing house,
Yes.
Like,
no, I think about it only because I think about it when driving, and I think about it in the shower, like times when I'm not writing, then I have all these other thoughts, and I think, and I don't know. Well, I mean, I've had other jobs, and I left the job and I was like, bye. And as lawyers, we talk about it, because your clients are like, can I call you in the middle of the night? And you're like, no, I'm going to go home and eat dinner with my kids and do these things. And it's not that we don't care about the lawsuit against you. We just, that's not our life. And so obviously you're thinking about it 24 hours a day, and we are not. And it's not bad or good. It just is. Yeah. I don't know.
Accurate.
Yeah. So I want to say this, Pippa. I'm so glad to get to talk to you, because I think about you. Well, apparently every time Normal Gossip comes out, but I think about you often.
Yeah. So visiting like this is amazing and fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really, really grateful to talk to you. It was good to see your face, which nobody else will see, but it was good to see your face. And it's all sunny, and your environment looks great, and I love it. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time for the podcast and having this chat for my listeners, who I'm sure will love you as much as I.
Oh, I hope so. Well, I am thrilled to be here. This has been so much fun, and I'm so glad you reached out, because it's an honor to be here, and I'm excited.
I know. I'm excited too. So thank you so much, Pippa.
Absolutely.
This has been A Time to Thrill with me, your host, author Aime Austin. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you share, rate, and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It will help others find and enjoy my conversations with brilliant women creators. Also, please hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. In addition to hosting this podcast, I'm the author of the Nicole Long series of legal thrillers. The The first 4 books in the Cole Long series are now live. You can download Outcry Witness, Major Crimes, Without Consent, and The Murders Began to your e-reader right now. I'm also the author of the Casey Court series of legal thrillers. These titles are available wherever books are sold, your local library, and also an audiobook. My next book, His Last Mistress, is available for pre-order wherever you get your books. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Legal Thriller Author. You can find me on TikTok at Social Thriller Author. You can also find this podcast on Facebook at A Time to Thrill. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you soon with more great conversations.